access to all civilian flights. The U.S. Embassy in Qatar has implemented a shelter-in-place order for all personnel and recommended all Americans to do the same until further notice. Mehran, let's just come back to you, if we can, to keep this discussion going. Look, we've seen Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu make more visits to the White House, probably than any other leader since Trump started his second term. Experts say that he may actually be pushing for a longer military campaign with a goal of toppling the Eurasian regime. But that doesn't necessarily fit in possibly with Trump's preference for what we understand would have been a sort of limited strike. So what is the Israeli endgame here? They're just talking about a preemptive strike, and so far it seems to be 3 locations across Iran at the moment. But what is Israel's endgame here, or what is the aim of this preemptive strike?
What we have seen is that the Israelis have long sought to escalate a localized conflict, whether it's Syria, Lebanon, or any of the other immediate areas of Israel, and they've sought to draw in Iran because, according to Israeli calculations, once Iran is drawn in, then the United States would have to be drawn in. And so this is kind of a perfect example of an Israeli playbook to launch limited strikes on Iran, provoke Iran into a massive attack, then in turn provoke the United States into a prolonged involvement. We know also, as you mentioned, Darren, that the United States has been talking about a limited strike, at least Trump has. And within the Trump administration, we've got people like Vice President Vance, who oppose a prolonged military engagement, and people like Secretary of State Rubio, who just a couple of days ago talked about Iranian missiles as an existential threat, not just to the United States, but to America's regional allies, and therefore came pretty close to calling for regime change. And so what we have is kind of lack of consistency on the part of the United States in terms of exactly how to become involved, how to engage with Iran diplomatically, either or through a limited military conflict, or a prolonged war that would entail regime change. And I think the Iranians have been braced for a prolonged war. Now, whether the Iranian government can afford a prolonged war of attrition the way they've been planning on it is a different case. But certainly the Iranian government has been preparing itself for a prolonged war of attrition, which in its calculations, neither Israel nor the United States can afford.
All right, Mehran Kamrava there, Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Mehran, always good to have you with us. Let's bring in, if we can, before we go to our next guest, let's just bring you another piece of news we're getting here. A US official has just told Al Jazeera that the United States is launching joint strikes with Israel. So if you're just joining us here on Al Jazeera, we're getting these lines coming in thick and fast because of this breaking news story that the US is actually making joint attacks. They are working with Israel on these attacks on Iran. Let's bring in Akiva Eldar. He's an Israeli political analyst. Akiva, you're in Tel Aviv. We've been talking to you now for many months about the build-up intentions and the US military assets in the region. What's your response, first of all, to the news of the attacks, this preemptive strike by Israel this morning on Iran?
Good morning, Darren. First of all, we woke up this morning with something that was familiar to us a year ago, and we wanted to forget. This is the sirens and making sure that the sealed room is available and we have enough mineral water there, and to call the children and the grandchildren to make sure that everybody is okay. But now it looks different. It is clear that it has to do with domestic politics. There was a poll published yesterday in one of the newspapers that shows that close to 2/3 of the Israelis, of the Israeli public, is in favor of war with Iran rather than reaching some settlement between Trump and the Iranian regime. The other thing is that every evening in the news, the networks are offering some kind of interview with an Iranian, with, of course, his face covered, that is telling us about the atrocities, what is happening there. And Netanyahu is playing kind of a Robin Hood. He's coming now to save the Iranian people. And this is the big difference, because this is happening after the big, involvement of many Iranian people in the kind of revolution and what the Iranian